Hello APUSH students. Today we'll be examining the Supreme Court case Fletcher v. Peck in 1810. This Supreme Court case occurred when the United States was still a fairly young nation. The case of Fletcher v. Peck has its beginning in the late 18th century with the Yazoo Land Act of 1795. The significance of Fletcher v. Peck is that it was the first time the Supreme Court held that a state law was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court's decision also helped create a growing precedent for the sanctity of legal contracts. The Fletcher v. Peck case of 1810 was a landmark United States Supreme Court decision. One of the first cases in which the Supreme Court ruled a state law unconstitutional, the decision also helped create a growing precedent for the sanctity of legal contracts and hinted that Native Americans did not hold title to their own lands.
Following the Treaty of Paris ending the American Revolution, Georgia claimed possessions of the Yazoo lands, a 35 million acre region of the Indian Reserve west of its own territory. This land later became the states of Alabama and Mississippi. You can see the Yazoo lands in the image above. The lands are west of the state of Georgia. In 1795, the Georgia legislature divided the area into 4 tracts of land. The state of Georgia then sold the tracts to 4 separate land development companies for a modest total price of $500,000. That's about 1.4 cents per acre. A good deal even at 1790 prices. The Georgia legislature overwhelmingly approved the land grant known as the Yazoo Land Act of 1795.
It was revealed that the Yazoo Land Act sale to private speculators had been approved in return for bribes, and after the scandal was exposed, voters rejected most of the incumbents in the next election, and the next legislature, reacting to the public outcry, repealed the law and voided transactions made under it. Of course, this was followed by a state of unrest from the purchasing members of the Yazoo Land Act. Those who had purchased the land refused to accept the return of their purchase price, and much of the land was resold to bona fide purchasers at great profit. Some of the land was resold to individuals. In this instance, John Peck purchased some land that was part of the 1795 grant that would later be the cause of the Supreme Court case Fletcher v. Peck. As previously mentioned, John Peck purchased some land that was part of the 1795 grant, and in 1803 he sold 13,000 acres of it to Robert Fletcher for $3,000. The $3,000 price tag averages to 4.3 cents per acre, much higher than the original selling price of 1.4 cents per acre. Peck, in spite of the 1796 statute that repealed the Yazoo Land Act of 1795, had placed a covenant in the deed that stated that the title to the land had not been constitutionally impaired by any subsequent act of the state of Georgia. When Fletcher discovered the sale of the land had been voided by the state law, he brought suit against Peck for damages. Fletcher claimed Peck had lied to him in promising he had a good, clear title to the land.
A federal court ruled in favor of Peck, and Fletcher appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The question before the court was whether the Act of 1796, which was repealing the Act of 1795, was a violation of Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. In other words, whether once the state of Georgia had finalized the original sale of the land, it could constitutionally repeal that sale, or whether the Constitution prohibited it from doing so. The Supreme Court, in a 4-1 decision written by Chief Justice John Marshall, ruled that Georgia had violated the contract clause of the Constitution when it repealed the grants. The court conceded that the fraud underlining the grant was deplorable, but it rejected Fletcher's argument that Georgia had the sovereign power as the agent of the people to repeal this act of public corruption. The court reasoned that Peck was an innocent third party who had entered into 2 valid contracts. First, when he paid for the land from the original grantee, and second, when he sold the land to Fletcher. Peck thus fell outside the original fraud the Georgia legislature sought to undo in its repeal. As Chief Justice Marshall put it, when a law is in its nature a contract, when absolute rights have vested under that contract, a repeal of that law cannot devise those rights. Fletcher's suit against Peck was dismissed, and Georgia's law repealing the grants was struck down.